Well, kia ora koutou everyone, and welcome along to our extraordinary meeting, Wednesday the 2nd of April. I'd ask you to stand for opening karakia and council affirmation. Whakatake te hau ki te uru, whakatake te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, Tihei Mauri ora. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We will. Thank you, everyone. There's no apologies for the meeting. I think we're all here. Any conflicts of interest that people need to raise? No. We have confirmation of our minutes from the meeting on Wednesday the 26th of March, which was deliberations last week. Kind of a mover and seconder for those as for the record. Thank you, Malcolm. Seconded, Shane. Thank you. Is there any discussion on those minutes? No. And today we're here for one paper. This is the local water done well delivery model decision, and I feel like I've started the last few meetings just acknowledging the work that's gone in to this, but I'll say it again because I think it's important and it's taken a whole lot of effort by many people to get us to this point. That's been councillors. Thank you for the questions that you've asked and the depth of understanding that you've gained and the way that you've engaged in this, particularly those on the subcommittee that were doing some extra work on this leading up to the consultation and deliberations. Thank you to staff for the work sharing that's gone on and the expertise that we have within the organisation, and also looking at bringing in the right expertise for us to help make really informed decisions, and to acknowledge the community as well for all the submissions that we received and community views that form a part of this decision making today. The paper has one resolution with point 1 and 2 that a council-controlled organisation fully owned by Selwyn District Council for drinking water and wastewater, and continued in-house delivery for stormwater services. Malcolm, you want to move that?
I do, thank you.
Great. Is it a seconder? Shane? Sharon, throw to you and you can talk through the report and stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And I just want to, again, reiterate and thank staff. And it's good to see people looking vaguely more healthy here around the table than compared to deliberations last week. So we have got Mike Wakefield online as well, our legal partner from Simpson Grierson too, should any questions arise. And I'm going to hand over to Tim and the team that's really just going to take you through some of the key bullet points and reminders.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon, and excuse me, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to take you briefly, or briefishly at least, through the key points of the paper. I'll start by reiterating the recommendation, which is that the council resolves its water service delivery model is a council-controlled organisation fully owned by Selwyn District Council for drinking water and water service delivery, and the continued in-house delivery of stormwater services. And also directs that Council prepares and executes an implementation plan for the establishment of a WSCCO and to achieve completion of the transition of drinking and wastewater services from Council to a WSCCO by the 20th of December 2025. The subject of this decision report is the two options available to Council in line with the options presented in the consultation document. Option 1 is to establish a WSCCO wholly owned by Selwyn District Council for the delivery of drinking water and wastewater services and the continued in-house delivery of stormwater services. Option 2, confirm in-house delivery of drinking water, wastewater and stormwater services. For clarity, it's noted that option 2 is not maintaining the status quo for in-house delivery of water services due to new legislation and increased compliance that would require new investment and therefore changes to the existing in-house model. Option 1 is the preferred and recommended option in accordance with the consultation document and supporting material, which identified Council's proposal as a new water services council-controlled organisation as the delivery model for drinking water and wastewater services, with stormwater services to be delivered by an internal business unit of Council. Option 2 is not the preferred option included in the consultation, as the continuation of an in-house water delivery model would require increased investment to meet anticipated legislative and compliance requirements. Post-consultation and council deliberations, option 1 remains the officer's recommended option for the reasons outlined in the report. The WSCCO model is one of the core options of the Local Water Done Well policy and is designed to be enduring and adaptable over time. Establishing a WSCCO ensures that water services are managed separately from other council operations, providing a focused and sustainable approach to managing water infrastructure. Given the complexities of council stormwater delivery and the interface of these with other core council assets, we propose the WSCCO be established to provide services for drinking water and wastewater, with stormwater responsibility continuing to sit with Council. Land drainage and water races will also continue with in-house delivery and are unaffected by this decision. There are benefits and risks for both models detailed in the report. In summary, the recommended option 1 offers several advantages for the Selwyn community, including enhanced funding and investment with improved access to funding and financing tools, including the ability to borrow up to 500% of its operating revenue through the local government funding agency, compared to the 280% cap for councils managing water in-house. Improved water quality and services, with increased investment directly translating into improved water quality and service reliability for our residents. Enhanced resilience in the face of rapid population growth, ensuring our water infrastructure can handle increased demand. Certainty and stability by providing immediate certainty for the Selwyn residents, allowing us to move past a period of reform uncertainty. The WSCCO model is designed to be adaptable, future-proofing our water services for regional collaboration and increased efficiency, and providing a depoliticised model for delivery of water services. There is a risk that spending is deferred in the interest of keeping rates low and to allow for funding of non-water related projects. This can ultimately create an intergenerational infrastructure deficit. By supporting the move to a depoliticised model with a focus solely on water delivery, now Selwyn can protect its current position and remove the risk of this intergenerational infrastructure deficit in its water and wastewater networks. It is also important to note the establishment of a WSCCO supports the community voice, and that SDC can direct the WSCCO to address community concerns through the issuing of a statement of expectation. Also, WSCCO maintains local control and accountability, ensuring that local needs and priorities are addressed while maintaining transparency in operations through the establishment of a dedicated board with accountability back through to Council. While not a matter for the decision before Council today, a WSCCO model does not preclude future opportunity to explore partnership opportunities, which could deliver greater efficiencies, standardisation, knowledge sharing, and ultimately lower costs for consumers. Partnering with other councils is not mandatory under the new legislation. However, we believe it is an inevitable step in the long term. We believe that any water delivery model we adopt must be flexible and ready to adapt to future partnerships and regional collaboration to support the future strategic planning and to optimise water delivery costs over time. Bit about implementation. Council directed in November 2024 that should a WSCCO be set up, the target date for establishment would be the 1st of July 2025. That was based in part on achieving first mover advantage to provide assurance for staff who have been through several years of uncertainty under previous water reforms and to seek alignment with the commencement of a financial year and budget setting. We are recommending a transitional approach be undertaken from the 1st of July 2025. This would enable a phased transition of operational components of water delivery to the WSCCO from the 1st of July, with the full transfer of responsibility and assets to be completed following the enactment of Bill 3, the Local Government Water Services Bill. The advantages of a phased transition are outlined in the document and include the allowance for services to be transitioned and processes established progressively to ensure continuity of level of service and customer experience. Excuse me. Financing to be established. Council is subject to LGFA timelines establishing access for a WSCCO. The transfer of assets and obligations under the Local Government Water Services Bill, Bill 3, following enactment to ensure advantages can be realised. A longer time frame to prepare the long-term plan amendment, which must precede the final asset transfer. The adoption of Council's annual plan 25-26, which will remain reflective of year 2 of the long-term plan. The setting of rates for 25-26 on this basis provides greater certainty for the community in 2025-26. Retaining flexibility and adaptability to respond to unforeseen changes in the regulatory, financial or operational landscape during transition. Also, the potential to shape implementation as the first WSCCO under the Local Water Done Well program. SDC's processes for establishment could influence later WSCCO implementations. The ability to maintain continuity of customer-centred levels of service by implementing a comprehensive transition plan to address any disruptions, and minimising disruption to staff while maintaining open and transparent communication. The paper further outlines funding implications with an assessment of the two options, confirming a WSCCO would provide greater financial flexibility in the medium to long term, more effective management of economic and water quality regulations, and enhanced resilience in the face of rapid growth. This model enables response to the legislative change, while, as previously stated, simultaneously positioning the Council to maximise partnering and efficiency opportunities as they arise. The following steps are required to ensure the successful development and implementation of the Local Water Done Well program. Firstly, a water service delivery plan will be developed based on today's Council decision on delivery model. Water service delivery plan will be reported back to Council for adoption, and the Chief Executive will be required to certify the water service delivery plan prior to lodgement to the Secretary for Local Government for approval by the 3rd of September. Excuse me. And if approved, a long-term plan amendment will be progressed to be the subject of a future Council decision. At this point, I'll pass back to you, Sam.
Great, thank you. Was Mike on board to share anything, or just for questions?
Just for questions.
Okay. Sharon, did you have anything else you want to add?
Thank you, Sam.
Okay. There's only two options that are in front of us. So if moved CCO option fails, then the other option is the one that we will be going down. So we don't need to then remove and second what the second option looks like. And I thought there might be some questions and things that you still might want to have in the room, but just offer an opportunity. I'm sure everyone wants to say something on this, but to go around the room and have everyone have your voice in the conversation if you'd like, and to ask any questions of staff ahead of coming to a vote. Don't know, Nicole, do you want to go first? We'll just go around, and then Grant and Deborah, and we'll work our way around the table.
So as already been said, whatever option is chosen, there will be change, and change in the water and wastewater operations going forward. The main thing is the focus of the Water Services Council controlled organisation, purely of ensuring that we have the delivery and supply of our water managed at arm's length from council operations, with a board appointed with appropriate skill set for that organisation. Yes, a number of our pipes are new, but there is still a need to ensure that into the future that it is planned well to ensure that renewals are funded and properly able to be done in the future. There will still be a statement of expectation from council to that organisation, with the council still having control. So from my perspective, that is the model that I think that we should be doing going forward.
I just see clarity. So what are we achieving here? You want us to? Is this our position statement, or is this our position about how we're going to vote, or are you asking?
No, we'll just go if people have questions that they'd like to ask, or if you've got some comments you'd like to make, and then we'll come to a vote. We could just vote now, but I think it's important that we have the discussion.
This is our position statement,
Yeah.
basically. Okay.
Well, that's what I wasn't quite clear of what was being said for that either. So you did put me a bit on the spot.
Okay. Right. Sorry. I'll take a bit of time then, because I've written quite a few notes, and please forgive me if I take a bit of time. I suppose this has been one of the biggest decisions I think I've made since on my time of council, and I spent a lot of time thinking very deeply about it. And I suppose the compelling question I've been asking myself is, what is the why? Why are we doing this? Why would we consider doing this? And who do I represent? I think is also an important question. And when you get elected to these roles, it's not carte blanche just to put your own view on the world. You represent a whole lot of ratepayers that have a view, and certainly we're very strongly informed of that view at our deliberations hearing. My assessment of what is the why is it was driven out of the Havelock North occasion, which is driven through this whole process where we are today. I suppose I'm trying to reflect the Havelock North experience versus the Selwyn experience, where we have actively invested in our water infrastructure and we have got high quality infrastructure and it is well managed. And I think in some respects we're sort of a square peg being trying to travel smashed into a round hole. So when you talk about who I represent and what are their views, it's probably well known I'm probably a privateer, but when it comes to water, I think there's nothing more fundamental than public ownership and public input into water. It's a basic human right that should be delivered at the lowest possible cost to the consumer. Is the Wisco proposal going to deliver that? That's a moot point, and certainly in the first 10-year period, it doesn't appear there's any noticeable benefit to our communities by signing up for this. So it's challenging in that. Obviously, we want a compliant service at a really affordable price. It's been mentioned a number of times, particularly around cost creep, that growth should pay for growth, and I certainly agree for that, and I've put forward some methodologies I thought might help with that with Alison, our CFO. But the ability to be heard and having meaningful say in how water is delivered to your property or to your premises is really important. I think ultimately the system we have now gives us a really strong opportunity to be heard. Ultimately, my job rests on whether the community that I represent do think we're doing a good job on water. And I think there has been a very strong, very direct pathway for people to be heard about water, particularly when you think that we have a unique situation in Selwyn where most councils describe themselves as 3 water providers. We have 5 waters, and which are all uniquely intertwined. One of the things that we saw that's been hung its hat on is enhanced funding and investment availability. I think we found out at the deliberations that it was relatively modest, the differential between the two. But if I reflect back to us as a council, this last year, I think it was, when we were asked to vote to increase our debt headroom up to 220%. There's a lot of thought went into that. And as governors, we were reluctant to do that. And so you've got this juxtaposition of saying debt is great, the availability of debt is great, but the reality of that statement is that the ultimate person who pays that debt is the ratepayer, whether it comes in one bill from the council or a bill from the council and the Wisco. Ultimately, the ratepayer pays. And my take on it, I think that having some tension in that is very valuable. And we were reluctant to increase our debt cap to 220%, but here we are slathering at the bit to get 500% availability for a Wisco. So it's what you use those funds for and how they're managed is really, really important. I think what's not covered in here is also when it seems to, I hope it's by inadvertent admission, that as a growth council, if we were to stay in-house, you can be classified a growth council and borrow up to 350%. So it's certainly we certainly are well than that. Improve water services quality and services by increased investments. I think if you have increased investment, whether it's in-house or with Wisco, you get better services. That's it doesn't matter which business unit you use. But there is this perception that publicly delivered services can't ever be as efficient as a council control, as a corporate model. I think I would really test that, because I think that we've got the basic, what we've done here in Selwyn has proven that to be wrong. We've been the first to have district-wide rating. We've been the first to have water metering. We've put in a significant modern modular system, sewage system. We've decided to make the change to both sewage from Ellesmere and from Melbourne to be taken to that centralised sewage system. So history tends to tell us that we've made good, strong decisions which have provided both for our ratepayers now and into the future. I think certainty and stability are certainly a good point that's been raised, and I support that. I think whatever decisions made today must be followed up with very strong action that reinforces and makes sure that our staff and potentially any staff that are employed have that sense of belonging and sense of being part of the organisation, because unfortunately you do tend to lose very good people when there's uncertainty in the... I think one of the things that you talked about was depoliticising water services. And I suppose to a certain extent I feel affronted by that, because not only for myself but for past members of this council and for past and future staff members of this council who have worked very diligently to provide water services, and to say it's a sort of projection that there's somehow some risk associated with the current governance structure, and it may have been the fact in other jurisdictions, but to lay that on our team, I think, is a very unfortunate slur on our team. And I particularly feel for our staff who have, without exception, brought very strong proposals forward to us, and some of them have been difficult, particularly around the upgrading of drinking water supplies, which we'll all remember was a difficult conversation. So where are we now? We've got a fully compliant drinking water system, a centralised modular sewage system, a district-wide targeted rating system, and water metering. I'm trying to see the demonstrable value, not only in the next 10-year period, but perhaps in the next 20-year period after that, of us transitioning away from our existing model to a Wisco. And I'm afraid I have to say I don't see it. The numbers don't support it. Our ratepayers, from what I hear, don't support it. I think we've got a window of at least 10 years, which we could still make a decision, but I don't support that, because as I said at the start, I think it may be a small step, but I think a step to Wisco is a step to ultimately privatisation of water supplies in New Zealand. And I think the reason I say that is not just hyperbole. The reason I say it is if you look at examples worldwide where this has been the first step, ultimately they've ended up in private ownership to the detriment of the people who turn on the tap and want to use water. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I would suggest if you look at other examples, that's where it ultimately ends. I'm keen to enhance the quality of an already good service. I accept that our current in-house business unit would need to be upgraded, and there will be more investment required. I also support the idea of an in-house dedicated water services committee, which would operate very similar to an audit and risk committee with at least 2 independent members, which could be subject matter experts, giving us the best of both worlds, where you have public governance and private. Can we ring fence income? I put a question to the CFO last night about that because I was very keen to understand that our water services are already target rated, so all intents and purposes, the people who use the services are paying for them directly. But I wanted to understand, on the opposite side of the equation, is the debt that is associated with those water services is paid for by those targeted rates. I haven't had the reply directly, but I've heard informally that is the case, and we already run ledgers to do that. So to me, that part of the equation is already set up. We are all very well equipped to do that. As I said at the start of the conversation, and I certainly want to people move on and have their say, it's been a very difficult decision, but I've come to the ultimate conclusion that I think the best interest of Selwyn ratepayers are served now into the future by an in-house business unit.
Thanks, Grant. Sorry, if I can just ask those that are here in the public forum to refrain from commenting or clapping. And you're here and you're welcome to be here. It's a public space and to witness what's going on. But just to allow those that are here to make the decision today to have their views would be appreciated. Thank you. Grant, thank you for sharing that. Deborah. Oh, sorry, Sharon first.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to have an opportunity to clarify a couple of points, and I'm going to look to you, Julie, or Mike, about your comments around privatisation. I think it's really important, Grant, to speak to that. And then I'm going to give Alison the opportunity to speak to the ring fencing.
I'll let Mike jump in if there's anything I miss here. So I just want to be really clear that the structure that has been set up here prohibits privatisation. So there is no ability for a Wisco shares to be owned by any entity other than a territorial authority. Mike, do you want to add anything?
I think you've captured the point pretty well there, Julie. But the other point to note is that the Bill 3 provisions do apply and limit the ability of a water organisation, which a WSCCO would be, limit the ability of a water organisation to be owned by anyone other than, in this case, a local authority. So that bill provision does preclude the privatisation concern, noting, of course, that it's a concern that's generally held in this case.
Thanks. And just from the revenue ring fencing, yes, we would ring fence the revenue, but from a debt perspective, that is where we are still coming up against the 280% or the 350 if we went down the route of a high growth council.
Thank you. Deborah.
Thank you for the comment. And thank you, Alison, for explaining that as a high growth council, we can actually borrow up to 350%. And we are a high growth council, not if we are, we are. Which leads me to the process of the piecemeal approach that seems to be of trying to extract information from this process to put before our ratepayers. We've given them a short window of 3 weeks for the consultation process. And I would like to deliver a message to central government with regards to the imposition that they are putting all councils in through this process. And if their goal is to actually make sure that local government acts efficiently, I would just like to actually say through this process, the way that you have put in timeframes, the way that you have still implementing legislation in regards to this, you are actually added a lot of cost to our ratepayers because they are the ones who are footing the bill. So that's my message to central government and the legislators who are trying to manage this. In actual fact, it's almost like central government is asking local government to commit to some sort of failure with regards to its ability to manage water and wastewater. And that really, really disappoints me. The other issue I want to bring up is with regards to the report. We have a section 78(1), and this is emphasised through the bills itself or the legislation, is that in every option which we would consider, we have to consider the views and preferences of people likely to be affected by or to have an interest in this matter. And we have to consider the views presented during consultation with an open mind. And we have to provide clear reasons for our decisions. Then I read in the report along the lines of consultation recognises that there are valid community perspectives that can be elicited outside consultation. Where council or councillors themselves have knowledge of these views, they can and should be considered. Examples include views expressed during other consultations, such as the LTP, or through councillor zones engagement with their communities, which may have occurred outside the consultation or when discussing distinct or related issues. The key point being all views of all parties must be considered. Consultation views are the only ones considered. I have had many discussions outside the 3-week window with people in the community who were unaware of the process that was actually happening. We have heard from nearly 90% of our population that actually presented to us that they do not want a WSCCO at this time. There is no reason why it can't be introduced later. It is at this time, and the information that they were given and the time that they were able to be consulted, that was their view. And I'm going to respect their view, and I will not be voting for a WSCCO at this time due to our community having told us the preference they prefer. They prefer in-house at this time.
Thanks, Deborah. And I don't intend to interrupt you when you're all speaking and sharing things, but if there's things that are factually incorrect, I do think that there needs to be highlighted, and rather than through a point of order, I'll just note that it wasn't 90% of our population that disagreed with this. It was 90% of the 400 people that submitted on it, and the views of the population, we don't know because a referendum wasn't held on it. So just to correct that, Deborah, I understand what you're trying to say, but it wasn't 90% of our population. You had a question there about how the views, though, come in through different processes rather than just the consultation. And Julie, I wondered whether you just wanted to touch on that.
Mike, would you like to touch on that a bit deeper for us?
Sorry?
I'm sorry, Mike, on the screen.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had trouble turning my mute function off there. Lola, we talked about this point briefly during the deliberations meeting last week, where you, through a consultation exercise, you will hear views and feedback from the community direct and in response to the consultation information, which in this case you were required to present in a certain way under the legislation. But that doesn't preclude the ability of the councillors around this table to bring to the conversation today and through the deliberations that you've had, the general understanding of what your community might think or be able to add to this decision that you're making. So it's not the case that you need to be confined to the submissions that you've seen, but clearly they are the most relevant and informed response to the proposal that's being tabled here as required by the relevant legislation. I think that's all I probably need to say on that point, Julie.
Yeah, that's helpful, Grant. Mike, thank you. Julie, did you have anything else? No. Cool.
Sorry, I just wanted Alison to confirm the question about borrowing 340%. Would you just like to flesh that out, please?
So just now we are sitting with a 280%, which is what LGFA For most councils, there is an application process we could go through with LGFA as a high growth council to apply to have a 350% debt limit. I think there is only one council just now that have gone through that process, and I believe it is Tauranga.
Thank you. Bob?
Yeah. Yeah, I think of the past. I've been here long enough to think, and quite a few years ago, that we had separate committees that run the water supplies, especially in rural areas. And since then, with staff working on it, things have changed a great deal. And I think we've got a great water system, and the staff are doing replacements. We also had a long-term plan, which the staff put a lot of work into, to actually provide for the future. So I think that is something that we should look at. And as far as the future goes, for the likes of me, water's never going to be cheaper. It's not going to go down in the time that I probably will be here. So there's a lot of elder people in our community that are really suffering rates-wise, and I think this is part of that. Even though it won't be on their rates, it'll be in a separate account. I think that's something we should think about, and what the community have already told us, and I will be voting to stay in house. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Shane?
Tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kātangi te titi, kātangi te kāka, kātangi te hoki ahau. E tu whari nei tēnā koe. Kei te rangatiratanga, kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi o Ngaitahu. O mana whenua, ngai tua hūriri, ngai te rui hiki hiki whānau, tēnā koe e Megan, e Puamiria. E ngā kōrero e tērā wiki, e whakaro, whakamaumahara. I felt like the earth, I wanted to be swallowed up in the earth. Actually, some of the submissions that were made last week, we heard from our submitters, and some of it was quite hurtful and disrespectful to my culture, and I felt to this house. This house is a place of honest discussion, debate, robust deliberations, and it was very hard for me to disseminate information whilst being verbally denigrated. So if there's any word of advice, potentially it would be to treat others how you would like to be treated, especially those who are making decisions. So although potentially some of them aren't here today, I just wanted to say that I was actually quite hurt by some of the conversation, and then furthermore was surprised that even though one of the submitters said they couldn't understand Te Reo Māori, once he read his hat, which was in Te Reo Māori, he could completely understand that. So I struggled in some instances to believe some of the submissions that were being made, a lot of them against. So today I'll speak for those that submitted yes to the minority and to the silent majority. It's down here somewhere. So I felt compelled today to sit down before Council to discuss and debate the topic of local water done well, given why water is, was and always will be an essential life-sustaining resource for our people, our children, our places and our visitors. In 1769, my ancestors, led by the Rangatira Tapua, led a fleet of waka to engage the Endeavour and Captain Cook in 1769 and offered him some land and a place to stay with water because they were quite sick, with love and aroha. This is what they did. At Christchurch Libraries, 16th of February 1770, Captain James Cook came down here, Canterbury Peninsula. In 1843, William and John Deans arrived and established a farm at Putaringamotu and named it Riccarton. In the 19th century, the early settlers then drained it, the Canterbury Plains, to make way for farmland and urban development, as they put it, to improve both agricultural land and living conditions. Swamplands were drained to create suitable soil for farming. 600 years of mana whenua living, the land was drained. Along with it, the mana, someone couldn't understand what mana meant, integrity, or as the dictionary defines, incorruptibility, and mauri, life-giving force from the land of which flowed, and the people mana whenua, mehika kai, of which were sustained by it. And I'm saying this because there seemed to be a general lack of understanding and or respect from some of the submitters. The what? First of all, I'd just like to thank Sharon and the team of staff for going over and beyond in providing the information. Sarah, all of the team for doing the best they can, which I think was quite extraordinary, and getting the information, the tons of information out there whilst continuing to deliver on the business as usual, which is safe, clean drinking water, flushing toilets, and the rest of it. And that was due to being to remain compliant with the legislation that's been put forward to date. What is Local Water Done Well Coalition's government plan across New Zealand to address the long-standing water infrastructure challenges? That's our role, to get ahead of that, to address the long-standing infrastructure challenges as governors. It recognises the importance of local decision-making and flexibility for communities and councils to determine how their water services will be delivered in the future. It will do this while ensuring a strong emphasis on meeting economic, environmental and water quality regulatory requirements. The key components are fit-for-purpose service delivery models and financing tools, ensuring water services are sustainable, and introducing greater central government oversight, economic and quality regulation. We're passengers in this. We're being asked to make a decision that's already in motion in legislation and been decided for us. In order for us to remain in a sustainable position that allows us to continue to deliver safe, clean drinking water, we're no stranger to this. ESSS was one of those big decisions of the time before I got here. The only reason why we've got so much growth in this district is because we allowed it for it through prudent decision making to allow for growth. And now we're being asked to deliver. We're being told to deliver the same again. Selwyn is the fastest growing district now. Everybody is moving here. Everybody will continue to move here. They're moving out of the major cities to come here. It's our job to ensure that we have a sustainable model for the future generations, not for those now. That's not our role. Our role is to think about 50 to 100 years away. For the record, my name is Shane Epiha. I'm a two-term councillor, and for the last 6 years I've dedicated myself to learning how to be a better governor by committing to the learning of it, participating as much as I can in the big decisions. I'm an RFA qualified commissioner with a chair's endorsement, a qualified Institute of Directors member, district licensing member, chair of council's finance and performance committee, and most recently passed a bachelor's degree in applied management. So I've done this because I wanted to make sure I was making the best decisions, not for myself, but for my children's children. The major concerns that I heard coming through from the submitters, again, was cost and affordability, debt loading, growth, paying for growth, and local control. We've addressed that. I don't know how many times we've addressed those issues, and they still keep being brought up. So, to me, those have been addressed. I'm comfortable with the level of control that council still will have, that residents still will have in administering the water. Through the expertise of our council team and external Crown and legal professionals, thanks Mike up there, I'm confident the council has addressed those concerns. Council has complied with the legislation required by government for me, to make the best decision possible for our communities now and into the future. An in-house model would limit council's ability to borrow for the large-scale infrastructure. And as we've heard, there's cross-competition, and that to me is just kicking the can down the road when you've still got. This is the reason we got into this mess, because the current model doesn't work. It does work, has worked here because of good governance, but we're not going to be around in the next 50, 60 years, so who knows what will happen there. We need to make sure that it is safe from bullies and denigrating comments to say, I'm going to vote you out next term, I want you to vote this way. Actually, as we've already heard, safe, clean drinking water at the lowest possible cost is the major concern, is what we want for anybody, for our children's children. Then why would we allow a current model that allows for people to bully you into making a decision because they'll vote you out next time? How is that going to be safe? The Otago Daily Times, the 1st of February, reported that Dunedin City Council 50-year funding course forecast were the they're looking at $1 billion in the next 10 to 25 years. I think it is. That might be a little bit wrong, but the costs are compounding. We're in a great position now. Yes, that's right. But actually, in 25 years, we're not going to be in such a great position. The risk of having an in-house model is that you've got other competing projects, as we've already heard, and that is too much of a risk. The Water Services Council controlled organisation, we have experience with a council controlled organisation already, so we do a good job there. Allows for borrowing up to 500%. Not straight away we're going to go and borrow 500%. We've got enough rigor controls around a CCO to ensure that they're appropriately spending money where it's appropriate to do so. How much borrowing is needed will still be a decision that needs to be passed by this council. By separating the balance sheets, the sole focus is delivery of safe drinking and wastewater, monitored by Crown entities on quality, delivery and cost, which would mean council with governance will be a more effective and precise control. I've talked about fluctuation and overlap of non-competing water-related projects, but we've seen, as is evidenced, kicking the can down the road only sets us up for failure. The Commerce Commission, who currently monitor and set the pricing for fuel, electricity, dairy, and affordable, and making these things affordable to consumers, are to be the economic regulator. And Taumata Arawai, who we have experience with now, and we've already been through this process with them where we tried to do it our way, and we've complied. We've actually done a good job there. To the minority, the smallest voices in the room, the roughly 30 out of 418 that said yes, thanks for your wisdom and concern. I'll speak for you. There is much to do, and I thank the team of experts committing to leading in the space, or as a colleague put it, being at the table and not on the menu. I'm genuinely, openly saying that Council and the established committee are being as open and transparent as possible with information and under enormous pressure to deliver robust intergenerational water service plan by September. I think you've kind of got the gist of what I'm saying, and I could go on forever. But what I would say is that after World War II, the generation that came back, the greatest generation of all time, as they put it, they called them the we generation. They banded together, they put everything into providing roads and bridges and community halls, and they helped each other. And then that infrastructure got passed down to the next generation, which became the me generation, more concerned about with what I have right now than investing for the future. My support for the Council's recommendation for water-controlled, water services council-controlled organisation suggests that it's time to invest and allow the next generation, which I hope will be the next we generation, to look after the ones to come. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Shane. Tim, was there any no comment there? Malcolm.
I'll wait for my right of reply, thank you.
Lydia.
I think that this community, this decision doesn't weigh lightly on any of us. I think that we've all been taking a lot of time to read, to research, to find information, to digest it, to ask questions over many months, and so not just the past few weeks. I did get the numbers that I was looking for at the end of the last week, and that was really good. That provided some more clarity for me. When I think about our community, there's big concerns for them on, us making decisions here at this table that actually affect them and their homes and their security. And something that was brought up a lot at the submission stage was the lending and security on people's homes, and lots of that is actually squashed, as that won't happen, or the likelihood of that happening is very slim. My take on that, and I am happy if you want to correct me afterwards, is that it would be a levy debt recovery on people's homes if people did default on the LGFA funding. You say no?
We can come back to that if you want,
Okay,
Lydia, if you
cool.
want to finish your...
Yeah, sure. And over the past few weeks, as I have been talking with lots of people, they ask what you're doing, and this has consumed a lot of my time. And I tell them, you know, about the local water done well, and they say, "What is that? I don't know anything about it." And to me, that's really alarming. That yes, we had submissions here, but there's also a big part of, and I'll speak on behalf of my community, that don't know that this is happening. And that concerns me around our engagement, our consultation process, and actually that this is a really big decision for our community. You know, history shows that we've made, or I say we, but the people before me have made really good decisions at this table, and I thank them for that. We know that our community values water, and that if we don't deliver, we soon know about it. And I think that, you know, I've been looking at models overseas, how this has all happened, and I think that history is showing me that the further things are from a community, actually, the worse off they are. In the report, it states about governance and that we as a council would appoint the people to the board just as we do CORD. And the process around that is you get told, here's a candidate, it's a yes or a no. We're not actually involved in the appointment panel here as councillors. You get a recommendation of a person and it's a yes or a no. And so how much say does our community have in that when we have very little say? I think that Selwyn District Council is actually really well positioned. I've spent a lot of time reading our infrastructure plan again that spans over 30 years, our activity management plans, you know, back to the LTP, and you know, I'm trying to understand the why and the reasons. I look at the viability of a CCO, and talking economies of scale. I can't see that. That's not something that I'm actually understanding. I think if you had a Canterbury-wide CCO, I could understand economies of scale. The viability on our community to bear the cost of establishing a CCO, I don't think is appropriate. When we look at funding charges, and this is again, I'm trying to understand the why and the reasons and the impact on our community. Some of these numbers aren't making sense to me in my head around rateable units over time, and being told that the numbers or the rates charges or what that would look like flatline over time, and that is because the rateable units over time will increase, so they will cover that. But I'm trying to do the maths, is that the numbers don't stack up to absorb inflation and interest on those numbers over that period of time. If I go to our growth in rateable unit numbers that we have in our infrastructure strategies and in our long-term plan. You know, I asked Taumata Arawai when we had deliberations, what would we be non-compliant with? Because these are assumptions, and, you know, it's hard to make decisions based on assumptions. I like facts and hard truths. And I look back at our infrastructure strategy and our LTP, and you know, it states 90% of our pipes are very good or good, and you know, that was what Taumata Arawai had indicated that we might be non-compliant with, was pipe network and consent conditions. I see that these things are all factored into our infrastructure strategy and the LTP and our activity management plans. And it leads me to sort of think the why, and the why I see is the funding. That is part of the big reason that I see here. The funding is an issue. The debt ceiling is the issue. And, you know, I agree that I think it is good to have tension in that, because I have concerns of removing drinking and wastewater from our debt ceiling, that it just leaves open scope for more debt for other projects, for other things. And actually, I think that it is good to have tension in the spending that we do at this council. You know, our fiscal management is quite vulnerable. Our audit report showed me that last week. You know, and I wrote in the front of my book when I was very first elected, you know, who do I represent? What are the impacts on our community? And what are we trying to fix? And that's the lens that I apply to a lot of the decisions that I make here. I'm looking at the evidence from infrastructure plans and activity management plans, and I have full trust that our staff have done a fantastic job in that. There's some very, very talented people in this organisation. I think that, you know, we talked on privatisation and that this bill protects that, but what would the next bill be? You know, there can be amendments to bills. We can see things change. We don't know what the future holds in that. And, you know, I have some concerns around that. I think that ultimately when I look at the three things that I base my decisions on around the impacts on our community, what are we trying to fix and who do I represent, I actually believe that keeping this in-house actually enables the community to have a better view and more chance to feed into what they want. And ultimately, we are here on behalf of our community. I think that we already have a local water done well subcommittee, and I think that actually, you know, why could they not be charged with oversight of the internal unit where we already have scope to appoint industry experts? So I think that probably rounds up what I've got to say.
Thanks, Lydia. And do you notice that previous question that you had around the debt financing around the levy? Was that what you were saying around default?
Yeah, that's right, on default.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sharon?
So I'll start again. Mike will have, I assume, disabused me of any incorrect summations. So where I want to start, I'm going to make some assumptions on where I think this is coming from. Sorry, I'm going to start with where I think this perception's coming from. So rates are secured. We have that over people's homes. Now that security is for their payment of their rates. If people pay their rates and they stay up to date, we have no ability to access their property as security, to sell it from under them. It is only where they owe a debt to the council, personally, themselves, to us, where that security bites. We do not secure council lending against people's properties, and a CCO will not secure council lending against people's properties. So that is where I think the misunderstanding with the community has come in, but if I've missed the point, please correct me.
What is the security on the debt?
The security on the debt is rates charges and council property.
And what happens if that debt is defaulted on?
They can take our income to repay anything we have defaulted on, not if this was to remain in council, and similar for water charges if it were to remain in the CCO. And then once any payments on the debt are repaid, so then you're left with what income you're left with. So essentially all it does is it guarantees that your payments on your debt, in the same way you pay your mortgage first, you pay your loans first, and then your money is left for everything else.
Thank you. Thanks, Shirley.
The other point Sharon had asked, we to it, is I just wanted to give some confidence around the appointments process. So that hasn't been set. So how directors would be appointed would be a later decision that will come to council. So when we establish a constitution, a recommendation will be put forward. However, it will be a council decision as to how that appointment process works, whether you have it come to full council, whether you establish an appointment board that has councillors sitting on it, whether how that works is a decision to be made for what is right for Selwyn and yourselves at that point in time.
Thank you. Thanks, Lydia, for your comments and questions. Phil.
Thank you. I'm going to start with, everyone's been thanking the staff, and I'm just going to double down on that by thanking the staff that have made it. The staff that we employ as our council starts with Sharon and goes on to these people, the lawyers, the senior leadership team, the water professionals, people with a huge knowledge base, massive knowledge base, incredible skill. Now, we pay for that skill. We pay market rates, I would imagine, in most cases for that skill. So I thank you for using the skills that you have gleaned over the many years to come to us with the recommendation and to unpack this really complex community and legal issue. So, which leaves me conflicted, because then I start looking and saying, well, our community is not aware of the requirements of the legislation, and the feedback we were getting from our community and the submissions were a lot of it was misunderstood or misunderstanding. And then the threats coming in, as Shane was saying, around the likes of, I'm not going to vote for you. I'm not going to vote for you. And what's more, you're making a racist decision. And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay. Then I challenged myself with thinking that why would a Wesco, I'm going to call it a Wesco, why would it be offer more resilience for our community now and as we grow? Well, shall I flip the question over? And why would the status quo offer a greater resilience than a Wesco can? And the reality of it is that the Wesco is going to be, it's going to have a statement of intent with council, and then they're going to solely deliver on that. They're going to be free from the confines of the other things within council. And if there's one thing that we should have separate, it's our water. Yeah, we talk about our long-term plans and our area plans, which talk about railroads, which talk about roads and parks and this and that and the other, and how the community does this. If there's one thing that we're going to consider that is separate, it should be water. And the people that we want to make the decisions around that, I'm not sure whether they are the people who sit around this table here who are vulnerable to the voting of the public, because it's something that should be depoliticised. And I think the word you used, Tim, was we need a focused and sustainable approach. I mean, that just resounded with me. So I turn my mind to another comment that was made about the future strategic plans around partnering and our neighbours, and I just dwelled on that for a minute. That's all led to helping me make some decisions. I find myself wanting the best services for our community going forward, not just for me, but for the future, for my children and my children's children. I find myself wanting well-informed people to make decisions based on facts and having the ability to make decisions, being empowered to make decisions around what is safe for water and our community. And after everything we've been delivered, I think that a Wesco is the only way that we can guarantee that we're going to have a resilient future. We talk about wasting money. If we employ all these people and we don't listen to what they say, that's a waste of money. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Megan. And just to note, Megan doesn't have a vote on this, but is a voice at our table. And Megan, you presented Mana Whenua's position last week, and you're welcome to share that again. But there's other things from a governance perspective that you may want to bring into the conversation as well.
Thanks, Sam. And look, so I just want to acknowledge what Shane brought to the table and the vulnerability I'm bringing to the table. How challenging this decision can be made, and I might not be elected, but I am definitely elected within my own community. And I want to be treated with respect and dignity by the communities that I represent. And I want that for all of you too, to feel respected in this room, respected when you're outside of this room. and respected in online forums. And really what I've found coming in here and working with you all for the last 18 months or so is that we don't have to agree, and we often don't agree, and our true reflection on who we are and our true characters are actually how we behave in those moments of disagreement. And even though I've got colleagues around me and that may not agree with my position, I really respect their opinion and the amount of time and attention everybody has given to this really significant issue. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, Shane. So last week I shared Taumutu's position, and I don't intend to canvass that again, because at the heart of it, it really does align with the One Water strategy that we had already agreed upon and adopted at the end of last year, which is that the mana and the mauri of all water is upheld in all of our decisions, and that is particularly so when we're making a decision about water. And for me, we do have three really key strategic priorities in that document, but what it boils down to for me in really plain language is efficient water use, good quality water at its source, good quality while we're using it, and really good quality when it ends up in its final receiving environment, which is Te Waihora and Muriwai and other coastal lagoons. So that's the lens that our community will be making or makes its decisions or shares our view with council. However, I will address a concern that I have addressed at the last week, which is a concern that is reared about whether or not the iwi seeks property rights or ownership over freshwater. And I've made it clear on numerous occasions that that is absolutely not what the iwi seeks, and has outright said that in many, many forums, including in the court case on rangatiratanga of freshwater. So, but what I will share is a private view. And the reason I'm going to share a personal view today is because it actually aligns with Taumutu position, so I'm quite comfortable sharing a personal view. And that is, there has been some real concern shared in public forums and private conversations about we are going to be compelled to join a larger CCO anyway. This is going to be done to us without us, and we're not going to be in charge of setting the strategic direction. And as much as I agree that is a real risk and a real concern, and some of that messaging has not been shared by the government in open forums, which does not help us to make a decision today in a public environment. But that's not the lens that has actually influenced my assessment of what I think is the right governance model moving forward. Instead, I prefer a CCO model because I believe that there will be greater efficiency by having a company that is solely focused on getting the most out of our water assets and delivering water services. You're going to have a group of professionals with skilled expertise, and it's not taking away from the existing expertise at all, but it's saying that this is going to be their sole focus. And that will enable us as a group of councillors to really set the strategic direction for what's right for this district, for our drinking water and for our wastewater. And so it will enable us to have the real high-level conversations with our community. And so when it comes to drinking water, it will be good to be talking about what are the impacts of climate change on water quality and water security. What about water source protection and water treatment? What are the things that we want here for us to set that guidance? And then with wastewater, it would be talking about, well, what type of disposal system do we want? Do we want to retain a disposal to land system? And what will the impact of a economic regulator be in shifting that? Like, will we have to move to a disposal to water system? And if so, if we end up having to be pushed into a particular direction, and we have had these discussions with our communities that say that is not the right model for us, I believe we can set that really clearly through the strategic direction, the KPIs that we give to a company, more so than if it's actually ring-fenced and in-house. not only do I think that shifting performance measurement to a company will enable us to think about the strategic priorities for water, but actually the strategic priorities for our whole district, and really decide what are the most significant and important challenges that's going to face our community in the next 50 years, and tackle that now. I also believe there's going to be a high level of transparency, because a really frustrating theme that's come out of our finance and performance meeting this morning was these ongoing legacy issues about we face some challenges around transparency of project performance and financial performance, and it is being addressed, but it does beg the question as to how long has it actually been an issue. And I think that having a company entity that has not only local government oversight, but has to have director responsibilities governed under the Companies Act as well, will mean that there is a high level of transparency. We will be able to hold the board of directors to a high level of account, and that this will be better supported through annual planning, bespoke, specific annual planning for drinking water and wastewater, annual reporting and auditing. And so from my perspective, I'm really thinking about what is our key role here, and it's to make sure that we're getting the very best out of the council assets and that they're performing really well to meet the needs of our district. And we're all here to serve our communities and to put people in place first. And I believe that that means making decisions about water that are 50-year, 70-year visions. And we're used to doing that in a Māori worldview. We're always talking about intergenerational strategic plans and making sure that the decisions that we're making here are for the long goal and holding the patience over generations to achieve that. And so from my perspective, I think that making a decision right now will be actually welcomed and thanked by future Ruahiki Hapu and by future Selwyn residents. And it's a difficult decision to do right now. It's a brave decision, but I think it's the right decision to move to a CCO. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Megan, thank you. Sophie.
Yeah. I guess I'll start by thanking everybody as well, everybody who's here, staff, but also community. This has been a very long road, and for something that has a stated goal of depoliticising water, it's extremely political. And the irony shouldn't be lost on anybody. I mean, we started, as Grant said, with Havelock North. It's gone through the whole Three Waters thing, during which there was an attempt to entrench the public ownership of water in legislation, and it made it through into legislation, and then it was promptly overturned by the same government. And for all that everybody says, oh, we've got no intentions of ever privatising water, I just want to point out that it's still a risk no matter which model we choose, unless it ever gets re-entrenched back in legislation. It's also ironic that the various groups of councils, the councils who joined together for Communities for Local Democracy and proposed a new model of governance for water to what is now our government, several of them in our neighbouring area have all chosen to stay in-house. And I just want to point out that it's quite frustrating that they made this happen, and we are living this now because they pushed for this and now they don't want to do it. But anyway, after Three Waters fell over and there was a change of government, we all had plenty of reflections, and the ones that I remember the most were that we talked about how the sequencing of how this all happened didn't go the way that it probably should have done, in the sense that we should have probably started with the regulations and the economic regulator and the water quality and the benchmarking, so that we could all see where we actually sit before having to have these conversations about whether to stay alone, whether to join together, and all that sort of stuff, before we discuss all those structural changes about the whole thing. what we've ended up with is it's an everything bagel, and I don't know if anybody gets that reference, but basically everything has been chucked in at the same time. And that, too, is extremely frustrating. I'm not going to say that we did a really good consultation, because I don't think we did, and some of that was to do with how the legislation set out. It met the legal requirements. It absolutely met the legal requirements, but it didn't meet community expectations. That said, it's really good to hear from the community, and I am very glad that we had the sections in there where people could give us their thoughts, not just a binary yes, no, yes, no. Like, it is good to hear what people's concerns are, and Malcolm, I know you said last week that concerns are put to bed. I don't think they were put to bed. It was just that we talked around it and we discussed how viable and relevant they were. That doesn't mean they were irrational concerns. That just means that they are real concerns that live in people's heads, and that have implications. What is frustrating still, though, is each one of them, in many ways, the privatisation, around the conversation around debt, all of these different things, many of them actually are not addressed, or cannot be fully addressed by either model. Debt still happens. Legislation still happens. Regulations still happen. One thing that does, and I did have plenty of conversations outside the consultation process as well, and it did frustrate me that there were some people with some really good thoughts who did not submit. And that is on both, regardless of which model they would have been advocating for. Yeah, I wish more people had submitted, frankly. But one thing that stuck with me as well is that there were several people who spoke about rates, and we've heard today around delivering water at the lowest possible cost. So one thing that I did do over the last few days is go through different annual plans of our neighbours to look at where they sit in terms of compliance with the existing regulations and their rating units and everything else. And I've went down the rabbit hole a wee bit in that I basically created myself a lovely spreadsheet and worked out if my house existed in Christchurch, Waimakariri or Ashburton, how much would I be paying in rates? How much would I be paying towards water? And you know what? I'm cheaper my rates bill is cheaper in Selwyn than in Waimakariri. I pay less for water in Selwyn than I do in what would have done in Waimakariri. And in Christchurch and in Ashburton. But what I see for what I get from that is that we are compliant for the current water quality barriers for protozoa and for bacteria, and our monitoring is good. Our consumption could do with some work, but our leaks are lower than everybody else as well. Ashburton's leaks, horrendous. Waimakariri and Christchurch, unable to comply or achieve even 50% of standards as far as barriers are concerned. That is a concern to me, and that speaks to the politicisation part for me. Because when you say providing water at the lowest possible cost, that is where you start to have those conversations where you start to compromise on environmental bottom lines, on resilience, and on public health. Because you can still deliver the water cheaper. That doesn't mean that you've done it right. That just means that it's cheaper and you can turn a tap on and you can get water and you can flush your toilet. And I do think we're in a very good position here in Selwyn. And some of that is to do with a lot of new builds. But Waimakariri and Christchurch have a lot of new builds as well. That's not the only reason. So we've also got a lot of really good staff who give us excellent information, and as a governance group over the last few triennia, obviously good decisions have been made. We're never perfect, but we've done a pretty good job, I think. And those who came before us have done a pretty good job. But do I think that can I trust that that will always happen when I'm thinking about the fact that I could be out of a job in October. I don't know who comes next. I don't know what circumstances they will be operating under next. I know that when I make a vote here, I have access to more time and information than most people do out in the community, and that does change how you think about all of these things and the way that you vote. And so I come back again. Sorry, I'm like everybody else going on a wee bit today. The one thing that I really think we need to be strong about if we go for a WSCCO is this whole statement of expectations part, because that is where we can put more community voice in. And we've had an awful lot of views come back at us through the consultation, through Future Selwyn, through various other things. That's where we're going to have to be pretty strong. In terms of appointing a board, they need to be appointed intentionally to cover off a range of experience and a range of qualifications, because frankly, elections are a bit of a potluck. And I found that when I used to work for a council, like, you never know who's going to get elected next. Again, we've done, hopefully we've done a fairly good job, but it's not like we're a board of professional directors here. And then as far as the Constitution's concerned, if we go down that route, then it absolutely needs to build all of that community feedback in. And it needs to build in protections against privatisation as much as possible, because nobody wants to go down that road. I guess I keep coming back to this. Water is extremely important. We know that, and we know that even more when we take community voice into account. But at the same time, water is extremely political. It always has been, and it always will be. And we haven't got time to faff around with this stuff. We haven't got time to faff around with public health and environmental bottom lines and resilience against climate change and earthquakes. And frankly, that's what can happen around this table when you're doing a long-term plan discussion, when you're talking about infrastructure, when you're talking about rates, and when somebody's coming at you at the supermarket saying, I don't like what you're doing, I hope you lose your job. And we are vulnerable to that, and we live here, and we know that. We're not dumb. Just that wee bit of separation, I think, and a constitution and a statement of expectations that gives a professional board the space to make decisions in a slightly less political environment, I think will probably be better in the long term. That doesn't mean I like the fact that it's being forced upon us, or at least that there's the decision of either direction is being forced upon us, because I still think we're doing these things in the wrong order. But we're going to end up coming back next year and the year after and the year after that otherwise. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. You raised there just around the statement of intent, and I just wonder whether to just get Mike to comment on the scope of the statement of intent, Mike, and, are some things excluded, or the level of control that we may or may not be able to have?
Sure thing. Look, a couple of really good observations I thought made there around the important things that this council will need to tackle if it does decide to go to the Water Services CCO model. There was a bit of discussion there about the need to appoint, and in fact it's come through in a number of the points raised so far. If the CCO model was used, the importance of having the best people to provide the guidance for what the CCO ultimately is responsible for. That's well and truly coming through in the bill that will provide for this arrangement. And the expectation there is that the directors of these water organisations will need to be appointed on the basis of their competencies and skills to perform the role. The expectation being that they have the skills, knowledge and experience in relation to the provision of water services that will mean that they are properly qualified to fulfil that particular position. So I thought I'd just make that point clear, because There will be a need if a CCO is to be stood up for this council to develop an appointments policy. That appointments policy will again be a skills and expertise based policy, I would have thought. So that's the first point I wanted to note there, just on the director side of the conversation. The second point is around the statement of expectations, and there again has been some good points raised about some degree of council control being appropriate and council direction, while also ensuring that too much politicising is avoided. And on the point that Mayor Sam just raised, there is in the bill provision for a statement of expectations for the new water organisations. It is different from what currently sits in the Local Government Act. It is more expansive, and just as a very quick sort of grab bag of some of the matters which may be included. We've got reference in the bill to shareholders' expectations of the organisation, including how they meet the objectives set out in the Act, which is a fairly broad and expansive provision that allows the shareholding councils to set a broad range of particular directions or expectations that they want to see achieved. Strategic priorities for the organisation, the outcomes that they expect the organisation to achieve through the delivery of water services. And so you've got a couple of provisions there which do provide some scope for direction from the shareholding council to the CCO in a way that I think will provide some appropriate level of political oversight and direction for what the water organisation will be responsible for. In that particular provision, there is a full range of issues, and I touched on these at the deliberations meeting last week as well, including the ability for the shareholders to decide how it expects the organisation to conduct its relationships and engage with the community, hapu, iwi, and other Māori organisations. So I do think that we can't ignore the fact that this isn't a shift to a completely depoliticised environment. We will have some accountability and governance control that this group should take some comfort from.
Thanks, Mike.
I think I'll stop there. Thanks. Cheers.
Okay, ta. Elizabeth.
Oh, it's great going last. I just want to thank all of the community, the over 400 people that submitted. And I want to say there was some fantastic comments in there and a lot of people done their due diligence. I think they're really relevant, and I don't think it's a case of the nanny state where as governors or staff that we know better than our community. And I think that we need to realise that our community have just as much access to the information as we did. They wrote in some absolutely incredible questions and received some really good answers, which allowed them to be in the same space as what we are in this decision-making process, in my view. And I feel that that this is, I agree with Grant, I think this is one of the biggest decisions that this council will ever face, and I don't take that lightly, because this impacts our rates going forward intergenerationally. And that is why the Wesco's been promoted. It's been promoted so it can create intergenerational debt. But I just want to ascertain that my coming onto council is because of my concern about the way the council has been operating in recent years over increased debt and increased expenditure and a lack of accountability back to the community. And I feel that's what's been probably approached in our submissions that we've received. Those very voices and those very themes have been coming back to us. What we've seen in the financial examples and the models is that the Wesco is disproportionately more expensive for a large number of years. And then it has a flat line. But even regardless of the flat line, it's still, for the first 9 years, $302 more expensive for every household. And then there's no guarantee of a flat line. That's just based on some predictive modelling. But we're a high growth council. So as a high growth council, how can we actually say that we've suddenly reached an end point? Maybe so, because we've reached our debt levels. But then if we've reached our debt levels, then how are we servicing all of this high growth requirement in a more productive way than if we have in-house? And what we saw this morning with our our budgets was that we have the ability in-house. We might not have that with the new bill, but at the moment the reason we're able to service our water so well is because we have the ability to actually take money from other pools and resources within council and distribute it as required. So we had a large number of water infrastructure that was serviced this morning because that money was taken out of the reserves kitty. That won't be available in the Wesco. So when the Wesco reaches its limit, then where is it going to go? There's also the concern of uncalled capital. And if we look at where we're going as a council, then will the Wesco at some point end up with debts that are unserviceable by our community in some way, and an uncalled capital then falls back onto the council, and then the council has to find that money. Now we know that council's true revenue is predominantly, by far and wide, the ratepayer. And so if we're relying on the ratepayer, then we come back to what Lydia raised, which is where if the ratepayer is unable to continue these giant ongoing year-on-year increases to their rates, and we know that they are not able to service this at this point in time, there is already a struggle in our community. And if we reach a point of saturation in which the ratepayers are either selling up and leaving, or they haven't serviced their debt, and then we come along and we put that back, that goes, as was explained by Julie, that goes back onto the ratepayer's home eventually. And I think that this is of grave concern, and we've already seen a number of alarming trends in our council. There's been compliance issues in which we've, I'm trying to think what the terminology is, but when people haven't paid their rates, so they've received additional, help me out here, someone, Deborah? Penalties, thank you. So we've seen a giant increase in the rating penalties recently. So if this is occurring and we've got rates increasing year on year, this astronomical amount, then we're going to see either an increase in rating penalties or an increase of people reaching more in the poverty line. We've got a problem here. I'm going to community meetings in the evening and I'm hearing about cars parked up with people living in their cars in our reserves. I know that we put in a digital fence, a gate at one of the car park areas, community park areas, because we didn't want homeless people to continue staying there overnight. We are actually just pushing down the road the issues that are prevalent today. I think we need to consider the equity issues that are going on. It is actually real-time issues, but we can sit in our little tower over here and have a blind eye to this because none of us are in this situation financially. But it's time that we get out of our little bubbles and actually consider what's going on for the people who have the 400 and something people who've submitted and said we can't afford to take on the Wesco option because of the increased cost. The in-house cost gives us the option as governors to have far more decision making by hearing from our communities and understanding where they're at and what they can afford. Now, obviously there's been the discussion about politicising and the discussion about council not servicing the water as required, but we've got to do a water services delivery plan. That's a legislative requirement, and that's going to have the oversight of Te Matua Arawai, which is the water services group, and the Commerce Commission. So we've already got all the same oversight, exactly the same legal requirements as the Wesco. So there is no profound benefit for having a Wesco. And the cost-benefit analysis hasn't come to fruition. We've asked for examples of that, and there's been nothing really evident to the cost-benefit of this process. So there is a lot of word salad. We've got enduring and adaptable. Okay, both are going to be enduring and adaptable. If they weren't, we wouldn't be in here today saying how well this council has done for the last number of years in putting in solid water infrastructure. Clearly, we're adaptable, and clearly, we're enduring, and we're doing a good job. Do we need bureaucrats to come in and tell our water engineers and the people who are already making the in-house decisions how to do a better job? I don't think so, because we already have proven, and we have a proven historical track record of delivering these services to a very high standard.
I don't know. Just you can't be critical of bureaucrats, and if you want to clarify what you mean by that, because the staff, if you're intending it to mean the staff.
Sorry, no offence to the bureaucrats. I'm simply saying that our staff expertise are already at a high level, Sam. So there's nothing on the bureaucrats. I'm saying that that's just an additional middle management that I don't sense is required here.
You're not including our staff in that comment. It's not.
No, I was actually saying our staff are doing a brilliant job. So well done to our staff, because they've already proven what a fantastic job that they've done. We as a council, and it is regardless of whoever is voted in and elected, our staff provide the recommendations. And given that Te Mātua Arawai and the Commerce Commission are going to be overseeing those decisions, it doesn't matter who's elected in here, because we're still going to have to abide by the compliance teams that are going to be appointed. I think I've pretty much covered most of it, but I also want to say that in terms of our Māori and their expectation to have quality water, it is a requirement for Māori to be involved in all future water decisions, regardless of which model. And we've got adjoining councils that have decided to go in-house because they've done a very good business case on where they're at, and their business cases have shown them that the in-house model is going to be the best to serve their communities. And I think we need to actually, for those of you who've gone ahead and already made up your minds, I think it's well worth considering where we're going to be in the future if we do not consider the equity and the quality for all of those in our district. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Alison might just want to speak to some of the financials. Yeah, Alison, around just clarity on those financials that Elizabeth raised, you want to add any context?
No, I think thanks, Elizabeth, for your points. So we've talked a lot about the differing models and the cost structures, and we know in-house will incur additional costs. We know status quo is not an option going forward. So I think we've covered that. We've covered the debt levels as well. So I mean, if we were to look at in-house, we will still be competing against the debt limit that we have, whether it be 280 or 350. Ring fencing will not change that at all. I think the other thing we just mentioned, just with regards to finance performance this morning, we talked a lot about the rates penalties, and we will bring a paper to that next meeting that actually highlights where the differences are. Are there themes there? We don't have that information to hand, but we will bring that to the next meeting.
Thank you. It's interesting the depth of feeling that we all have around this conversation, and it's good that there is that, and I want to thank you all for the time that you've put into carefully considering where we're at today. For me, why we're making this decision is to ensure that Selwyn's water and wastewater infrastructure is excellent in 100 years' time. And that starts now by planning and structures and setting things up well. And so it's not just a decision for this year and next year. It is that, but it's also what's the trajectory of the decision that we're making now. And I want to make a strategic and enduring decision, and that is what the Minister has talked about us making and councils across the country making. The conversation Havelock North was raised earlier, and that was a really sad time for our country when there was death and sickness of thousands of people because of poor water oversight. And there were a number of reasons for that, and the inquiry went into this. But in 1999, there was a letter between central and local government basically saying we need to shift and change the way that water's done. So Havelock North was 17 years after that, and nothing had been done in that time. Havelock North happened, and this whole thing has picked up a lot of speed since then. In 2021, I remember all of our staff in the water space, and see Murray sitting at the back there working over the Easter break, felt like a few days before Easter, the government asked for all this information on reform, and there was a number of people that worked in councils right across the country who from that point on, not only did it affect their job, but it started to affect their personal time, and that happened at Easter, it would happen over Christmas, it happened over many times, and for the past 5 or 6 years that has been 5 years that has been the case. The old way has been that councils do it directly, and I thought it was really great to hear from our community during the submissions that they were proud of what we'd done as a council. They'd put us, said we have done a good job. Things are in a good space right now. But central government, both of the last two governments, have identified that New Zealand needs new ways of doing essential infrastructure like water. And both of our two options that we've got today have, upsides and downsides. It's not going to be a unanimous decision. I can hear around the council table that there's good views that go for one option and good views on another option too. So in that consideration, it's not just what has less risk or what is cheaper or what brings the best certainty or what does our community want. It's looking at all of those things and then weighing up whether or not we think on balance one particular answer gives us a long-term outcome. We've done well in the past because we have moved early and controlled our own outcomes. So if we look back over the decisions to have district-wide rating and implement metering and go with volumetric charging and input UV onto our systems around protection for our water supplies, and we were the first to get a chlorine exemption. The reason we were able to move early is because we took matters into our own hands and made those decisions. They weren't universally popular at the time, but they were the right thing to do for our council, and I well remember those decisions being made. And so a decision to change today is a continuation of that culture that we have of staying ahead of the game and not waiting to be forced into something else. We are in a growth phase. I think it's been really well canvassed how we're in quite a different place than many other councils around the country, but we're not always going to be in this growth phase. And so if we're thinking about the next 100 years, we do need to be thinking about what is the right way to ensure that when things slow down and when we are managing and renewing and when most of our spend isn't just on the brand new shiny things, but is on looking after the infrastructure that in 2070 people say was put in 50 or 60 years ago, what's the best way of doing that? And when we look at councils and the current structure we have of councils controlling this, we heard from Te Mata Arawa the other day, a quarter of all wastewater systems have expired consents. So it's not just Wellington with water leaking in the streets, and we see that on the news regularly. It's a quarter of all wastewater systems around the country are not currently served well by the current system. We're in a different space because we're in a different phase, we're in a growth phase. But as we think towards the future, we need to consider, are we really that different than every other council, or is there a timing factor that's come to us now? When the government raised these conversations and put out the full water entity, it became really clear then that the cheapest option for all of New Zealand, if we just want the cheapest water is when Auckland subsidises the rest of the country, and we just have one water organisation, and then it's a flat rate across the country. But that isn't particularly politically viable. We saw 4 entities move to 10, and now we've seen it move to councils can choose to do what they want. And so as we do that, cost has become a driving factor, as well as the politicisation of this water decision. And Canterbury should be working together. We asked all of our neighbours to work together. We should have a regional deal. It's not just about water. Canterbury's got to be doing things together. And infrastructure like water, like transport, we already do our spatial planning through the GCP, but we do need to go further. And if we move to a CCO model, that sets us up well to have those discussions to make sure that not just our districts are in the best place possible, but that Canterbury and our region is as well. By moving first, that's sort of something that I've heard a bit of. Why are we going first? Why is this happening early? Most councils are out making these decisions at the moment. So if you want to say first, it might be by a few days or a couple of weeks. It's not really first. All councils at the moment across Aotearoa are having to make these decisions. And so we will soon know everyone's decision around what they're going to do. Many councils are choosing a joint CCO. Some are choosing to do a standalone CCO. Lots are choosing to keep it in-house at the moment. But they're decisions that councils have to make right now. This is on us to make this decision to ensure that we can have a water services delivery plan submitted, not just on the 3rd of September, but it should be done before that. We're not a deadline council. We don't just wait till the end to have it done. We get ourselves set up and do things in a timely and ordered way so that we put our best foot forward. Past decisions have really helped us, and a number of you mentioned it, and I want to acknowledge previous councils for the investment and decision making that's been made into our water and wastewater infrastructure, and we heard that through the consultation. But we can't just rely on our 2015 self for the best decision to be made for our future. I mean, I'm really glad the 2015 council made some big decisions around the long-term plan and implementing district-wide rates for the following couple of years. But we need to make 2025 decisions now. We're 10 years on from that, and I can't just think that that was the right decision then and for forever. We always need to be considering what's the next thing for us. We've heard from Mana Whenua. Both Ngāi Tahu and Ngāi Tuhurere would prefer us to take the water CCO route, and we need to consider that. Annalisa and Bruce, our independent voices on audit and risk, have also said that they think that the WSCCO is the best choice, but would need to ensure that any change is done well and that we de-risk the change. And that's good advice for us to consider should that be the outcome today. Ravine, another expert that we've brought into our subcommittee, also supported the decision to prefer a CCO in our consultation document. So it's not just the voices that sometimes we talk about. There's other people that are involved that we've brought in to help guide our decision making, and yeah, those voices are important for us too. The Waiora One water strategy really talks to the health of Te Wahora is a key driver for all things that we do with water. That includes its tributaries, and our infrastructure plays a key role in ensuring that is done well. And partnership is at the heart of ensuring that we do that well. Councils, from what I've seen, when councils decide to go down shared services routes, shared services is a great way to try and do things better and bring in economies of scale. But at their heart, there's a level of ability just to keep my own say in this. And whenever the leadership changes or election happens and everyone goes, well, why have we got that shared service with those people and how does that really work? Maybe we want to change that. It causes a whole lot of disruption as well. If we were to end up in a space where we have joint water services entities, or we all buy into whatever's happening rather than just saying, I'll do it for now, but I'll just hold myself back a little bit and, test it out. That's not the most efficient change that we could make. So I do want to ensure that when we think about the right way to move forward, when we have conversations to partner, and we know that they will come, many of you have alluded to that already, we want to be in the best place for that. And I think a WSCCO, whether that's next year or in 5 or 10 years' time, puts us in the right place to be able to do that. This conversation is getting really tired. We've been having this conversation now for 4 or 5 years. We could keep having this conversation next year and the year after and the year after. I think we're a council of action, not of continual talk and chatter about what might be. And so being able to get on with whatever's decided today and allow our staff to have some certainty is important. We need a strategic, as I said earlier, an enduring decision that's in the best interest of our community's long-term aspirations. And I can tell by the manner that you've all approached this that we really deeply care about it. And I said before that, and you've all heard one another speak, it's unlikely to be a unanimous decision. So I just expect and ask that a culture continues to be that we debate the issues and we respect the people that bring the views to the table. And as we take corporate ownership of whatever decision's made, we all own that decision. It's our council making the decision today, and we support the direction for you, Sharon, and staff to implement wherever we go. So, yeah, thank you. And Malcolm, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you for your comments, Sam. And to start off, Sophie, you're correct. I did say some of these things were put to bed last week, but as we've seen unfold before us today, the things that I thought would put to bed were the taking of people's houses, because the sky was going to fall in and we're going to default. And now we hear about uncalled capital, which has been explained to us multiple times, is not going to happen. The length of consultation, as I set out in the PA bill, and the provision of the bills and the and the ability of interest rates for borrowing. I thought we'd put them to bed last week, but they come back again today. We've had many comments today about being able to do it in-house, and I'll just remind you of some of the things that are here in the PA Act, the statements and the bullet points that say what's going to happen if you do it in-house. We will have to meet all relevant regulatory and quality standards for water services, be financially sustainable for the Territorial Authority, ensure that the Territorial Authority will meet all drinking water quality standards, and support the Territorial Authority's housing growth and urban development as specified in their long-term plan. Well, as you may be aware, we have to plan 30 years ahead for our housing. So that means we're looking at 30 years ahead for our infrastructure. We've just heard today in an earlier meeting that 50% of our DCs are into the sewage rate alone, let alone the drinking water rate. So as we look at the way we're growing and going forward, there are many constraints to being in-house, and I think many risks to doing it in-house. And not to mention those damn bureaucrats from Wellington telling us what to do, because that's what they're doing with the PA Act and the ComCom. They are telling us what we're going to do. And they're also telling us that if we don't like your water services plan that you put forward, and we don't think you've got the right funding base, your debt levels might be getting a bit close, we are going to make you join a CCO. That's no hollow threat. That is there in the legislation. So what I've always said is I'd rather be at the table than on the menu. And by that I mean I think we would be far better off to be a CCO and have somebody join us and be able to help them pay off the cost of having set it up, and to have us and have control to the future over what happens with our water, than not have control for the future over the water. We've heard about depoliticising today, and the model has worked past in the future. Will it be the same again as we go forward? Well, we know each other around the table over 3 years. Many of us are not going to be around the table whether we like it or not in the next 3 or the 3 after that or the 3 after that. And who knows what decisions are going to come out of that. This council has always been proactive in thinking ahead. As Councillor Epihar has said, we are passengers. We are passengers to those damn bureaucrats in Wellington and what they say and what they do. The why is our future. The why is the future stability for our future generations. We've also heard of a future Canterbury-wide CCO. I'd love to see a Canterbury-wide CCO, but they didn't want to do it at the moment. They were all C4LD, as Sophie has put together. Maybe Three Waters wasn't so bad after all, because what we've got at the moment is a mashup. It's a desperate mashup by people who are taking us backwards to try and scavenge something out of it to make it work. And we have to take the opportunity to scavenge something to make it work, and to make it work for the long term of our community. Back in 2008, in this council, we could see the growth coming towards us, people wanting to come to live in Selwyn. And I remember having a brand new council and being an older councillor on that council even then, and having to cajole new councillors to borrow $90 million in 2008. A lot of money in today's terms. That $90 million was to expand the Rolleston sewage plant and to join us all together in the Eastern Selwood sewage system. That has led the infrastructure which has led our growth. This decision we make today is a similar decision. This is a decision that sets us forward for our future generations. So we will see enhanced funding and investment to meet increasing demand for upgrades and new infrastructure without putting undue pressure on rates and creating intergenerational future debt. The reason why we borrowed the money in 2008 was to do intergenerational funding for debt. You have to do intergenerational funding for debt when you're in a growth phase, and that is why we've done it. It's sound practice, and we need to continue doing that. Yes, in the meantime, this change will see increased rates for those on fixed incomes. And if somebody's staring that in the face in the next few years, I am one of those. In the short term, and that has to be balanced by the long-term benefits for those who come after us, our children and great-grandchildren. Those people who come after us, those who are coming to fill those sections, live in this community. They are the ones who will be better off for this and who will pay for it in the long term. So as I wrap up, I'd just like to say the risk of us not doing this in-house is losing control, because we could be pushed into somebody else's CCO. It could be Kaikoura's.
Yeah. Elizabeth, sorry, you can. Malcolm, there's just a point of order here from Elizabeth around something you've said. You know, just.
That's correct.
But if there's actually any issues, then either whether you're in a Wesco or in-house, you'll actually have Crown ministerial powers to appoint as needed Crown facilitator, which will assist, advise, direct or recommendations, or two Crown commissioners, which will be on the ward of the Wesco.
I don't think there's anything incorrect in what Malcolm said then. That's fine. Okay. Sorry, Malcolm.
I'd very much like to see Canterbury working together. In the future, I think we will be, if we like it or not, because I can see in the next 10 years we will be amalgamated into another authority. This is but a step along the direction which the previous regime decided not to do. And having been around the table for a year or two, I think that will be a natural progression. And I would just finish off with saying you cannot live in the past. You have to look to the future.
Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks, everyone, for your views. We'll move to the vote. So that we resolve, it's not both on screen, resolves and directs A, 1 and 2 and B. It was moved, Malcolm, seconded, Shane. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Yep, sure. Please raise your hand. All those in favour, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can see who those are to raise. And those against, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see who they are. Great. Thank you. That'll be noted in the minutes. Declare it carried. And thank you for consideration today and the debate. Sharon, do you have any thoughts on things you want to say, next steps, and where do we follow up from here?
That we'll bring some briefing back to council as to formal next steps in the coming weeks.
Thank you. I'll close today's meeting. Unahia, te po, kia wātia, ai, ko wātia. Kia ora, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.